Well, hello and welcome to today's episode of Need I Say Myrrh, the Christmas podcast. And today is a special episode. I mean, all episodes are special, but this one is a bit different from usual. We don't have a new guest for me to chat to. Instead, I'm going to offer you a special Christmas treat of a selection box from Series 1. There's some clips from the first 7 episodes in the first series. So those of you who are new to the podcast, who missed out on Series 1, you can still get to sample some of the delights that you can find in the first episodes. And those of you who were here last year, that was like a year ago, so you can experience them again. And my aim is that we'll do this same kind of thing next Sunday and the Sunday after, so we'll get a bit of each of the guests of the first series, and I hope I'd encourage you to listen to the first series as well, and maybe you can listen to the new episodes in the morning, the old episodes in the evening, as a nice routine to shape your festive Advent days. And now we're going to start with a clip from episode 1, which was again, as in this series, Dan James, Mr. Christmas himself. And you may have noticed on this podcast we spend a lot of time talking about the Muppet Christmas Carol, the greatest ever Christmas film. And here's Dan explaining why.
Oh, I don't think I could tell you how many times I've seen it. I love it. I love the story A Christmas Carol anyway. I think it's a fantastic short story. I think Dickens, I confess, I've never read any other Dickens, but I absolutely love A Christmas Carol. I read it every year. With some friends a few years ago, for 2 years in a row, we would read it out loud together over the course of an evening and some mulled wine and mince pies. That was a very nice thing.
Were you shocked the first time you read it and discovered that the Muppets weren't originally in it?
Yeah, that was slightly sad to not have Gonzo or Rizzo. But in my head, when I read it, I do picture Kermit as Bob Cratchit. And when I do the voices for my daughter, if I read it to her, it's always an ever so slight Michael Caine impression. I'm trying to rein in. No, I think it's magnificent. I think Michael Caine's emotion in it is brilliant. You've got the beautiful song where Belle breaks up with him that was taken out and is now back in, if you watch it on Disney Plus. It's heartbreaking when Michael Caine's duetting with his younger self about the heartbreak, and that really moved me as a child, and I loved that. But you can't not like Gonzo telling the story and all the humor and the silliness, and the fact that the film is so faithful to the original book. Like, it's so tight. I think it's great. So the amount of times I've watched it, I probably couldn't think. So I'm turning 40 next year. That's a lot of Christmases. I must be nearing 100 views of it in total.
Okay.
And also I would use it as a good like social event with our house. I would invite people around to watch it, and we'd have like loads of mulled wine and mince pies. And you've been in our front room. It's a decent size. We used to get like 30 people in our front room crammed watching a Muppet Christmas Carol once a year. And that's been stopped because of COVID, and hopefully going to restart this year.
There we go. That's exciting. So that's an open invite to Dan's house.
You feel free. If you want to find the date, just get in touch.
That'd be good. Yeah, no, it is a great film, and the thing I think about is that I think it's Michael Caine's best performance in any film.
Yeah,
and when you step back from it and think about the fact that he is acting with people who are literally Muppets.
Yeah,
he does such a good performance. It's amazing. It is a very rewatchable film. We watch it at least once every year, but we haven't got up to 100 yet, but we'll keep going.
It's worth doing. And I learned apparently he refused to see the Muppets when he wasn't on screen. He wanted to treat them like they were other actors, so he refused to engage with them at all. Yeah, it's magnificent.
Now we'll move on to episode 2 with Jim Sayers, and one of the questions from the last series was, what is your favourite festive food? Not least favourite, but your favourite. And Jim decided to answer that question by giving us 2 very detailed recipes for Christmas canapes. And so here again, in case you need some ideas for treating your festive guests, here are Jim's recipes for Christmas canapes, and get your paper and pen ready to take a note of these.
Well, talking to you, Adam, it kind of has to be a pie almost, doesn't it, really? It was heresy if not a pie. But I am going to say heresy, and it's not a pork pie. I think that when you're preparing for Christmas dinner, one of the big problems is that you've usually got people driving a distance and they don't turn up in time. And so dinner gets delayed and crashes into the King's speech and that sort of thing. So what you need on hand are Christmas canapes. And so here are two. Can I sort of give you two mini sort of recipes which are really easy to do? Sun-dried tomato and cheddar frittatas are so easy to do. You've just got to get a jar of sun-dried tomatoes, chop them up, some cheddar cheese and chop that into little cubes, mix up about 6 eggs with them in a bowl, and chuck in some coriander, and then get a muffin tray, so they're sort of deep, bowls or whatever you call them, deep tins for each muffin, and then pour a little bit of that mixture just to sort of get less than a centimetre in the bottom of each tin, and bake them for about 10 minutes, and you get a wonderful rise on them. And obviously don't forget salt and pepper and seasoning and any other sort of festive spice or whatever you want to add in to give it a bit of zing. And these sort of mini frittatas are just you put them on a plate, and everybody who's waiting for dinner will just wolf them down. One step on from that, get some phyllo pastry, get a standard sort of mince pie tray, so not as deep, and cut your phyllo pastry into squares. Take a square, make the square slightly bigger than the bowls in the tray. Paste each square into the bottom with some oil, and then take another square and just turn it slightly, so you've made an 8-pointed star sort of thing. And so there's your lining, and on top of that you put a mixture of, well, you could use yet more sun-dried tomatoes, or you could use cherry tomatoes and just slice them in half, and what Bob Mortimer would call feta cheese. You've got to get some feta cheese and chop that up small, and then make a mix like for a quiche. So mix up some egg and some cream, and stick some herbs in it, and pour that over the top, and again bake that for about 10 minutes, and you just get a wonderful, it's part crispy, it's better than a quiche because it doesn't have loads of crumbly base to it, and it doesn't get a soggy bottom. And again, I've never seen any of those get left.
Well, thank you, Jim, and I hope that you enjoy making those at home. Now, we'll move on to episode 3. You may have noticed that one of the ongoing controversies or debates or disputes on this podcast is the value or otherwise of tinsel. And here is Sophie Killingley kicking off that debate last series.
My least favourite. Well, in a generic sense, tinsel. I don't do tinsel. My house is a no tinsel zone.
Okay.
It's just too much, and that might surprise people because my whole kind of MO is too much. But tinsel, I don't know. It's too much. I prefer a kind of a bit more of a classy tree, let's say. So that's my generic, but specifically there is one that I can't bear.
Okay.
But we have to have it up every year. So every year it's a family tradition that we buy a bauble each. We take the kids to a Christmas shop and we all choose our bauble of the season. And Pete, my husband, loves to try and choose the tackiest, most gross looking Christmas decoration he can. And one year he really succeeded by finding some kind of plasticky golden cherub. It was like a naked cherub holding a harp, which was kind of like covered in like golden glitter, which like drops off. And that he knew I could bear it. And so obviously he had to have that. So that's his favourite and my least favourite.
Okay. And it has to go up every year.
Oh yeah, the kids won't let me not put it on, even if I may try and hide it. Nope, it has to go up.
Now back to food. This season we've been asking people about their least favourite festive food, and a few people have given that controversial answer of turkey. Now actually that answer was anticipated last season by Ewan Jones, who shares in this clip his thoughts on duck versus turkey.
See, this is, as I was, so you sent through the questions and I was thinking about this stuff. I realised actually I'm a bit of a Scrooge. I realised having volunteered to kind of be a part of this, I'm actually not the biggest Christmas fan in a way. So Christmas food, I was thinking, actually, for me, do you know what? I don't even know if it counts as a Christmas food, but it's duck. A duck, like a roast duck. Because there's hardly any time in the year where you eat duck. And like, it feels like it's a step down from the goose, which I think is like, that Charles Dickens kind of the Christmas goose. But do you know what I mean? Like a good roasted, fatty, greasy. So it's the anti-turkey, because turkey is dry and dull, and like there's no taste, there's no flavor. The texture is fibrous, but the duck is succulent.
We had duck a few years ago at Christmas. This was probably about 7 years ago. We found there wasn't much meat on the duck.
Did you just get one like from the park or something? You need like
oh, you get yours from a shop.
It's well, okay, yeah. I mean, as I say, because it's a kind of Christmassy kind of thing. It's like I'm not a duck expert. I alive or dead. I like in terms of the prep and whatever. I do the basic, a bit of basting and stick it in.
Make sure it's dead.
The oven and see what comes out. Yes, not quacking. I don't eat the beak, and there's just I don't know. Duck is a treat, and like if anything, Christmas Day with all the work and all that effort and all that kind of stuff around it, a treat. Like if Rach said to me Christmas Day, I'm sorry, everything else has burnt, everything's done, everything's gone, but the duck's all right. I'd be just, look, that's the best. That's fine. We'll just sit and eat a duck. I don't need any of the other stuff around it.
But with a duck, without having less meat, you don't get the joy of so many Christmas leftovers, though.
That's true. Although I think the other advantage, I guess, maybe of the duck is that in my family, I would be the primary duck consumer. So I think I could probably eat my fill of Christmas duck and still have enough for like a curry or something, I could do that. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. Would you rather have one massive turkey and eat dry meat for a week, or would you rather have one beautifully prepared duck, but it only gives you 2 days of juicy goodness?
It's a commonly asked philosophical question, isn't it? And we do welcome correspondence on this podcast. Now, one of the other questions in the first series of the podcast was, who is your favourite person in the Nativity account, not including Jesus? And the overwhelming majority of people in the podcast said either Mary or Joseph or Joseph or Joseph or Joseph or Joseph. But there were a few people who went with a different answer, and one of those was Steve Neal. So here is Steve explaining why he really loves the shepherds, and in the process also giving us some top tips for our Christmas evangelism, sharing the good news of Jesus with people this Christmas.
So I'm going to go for a group of people. My favourite are definitely the shepherds, and there's so you can choose from. I think the angels in the shepherd story, you find it in Luke chapter 2, are really helpful because they're the ones that bring the good news of great joy for all people, which is a fantastic thing. But what I really love is the shepherd's reaction. So they go through quite a journey because they start off afraid because they've seen some angels, they've never seen that before, and traditionally the angels say, "Don't be afraid." They're still afraid. Then they hear this good news, and then they respond to the good news. They go and find this Jesus. They see Jesus, and then they go out from seeing Jesus and go and start telling everyone, which I think is just a brilliant thing as they head back. As an evangelist, I love to talk about Jesus and to help people talk about Jesus, because it really is kind of the most important thing to talk about, especially at this time of year, but all through life. And just seeing that kind of journey that the shepherds go on is a wonderful thing, because they start off not knowing anything. They're just normal guys. We're normal guys. We're normal people. But we get this extraordinarily good news. A savior has been born. And it's good news for all people. And then they discover it's true. Then they take that truth and then they just share it. It pours out of them. They can't not say anything. So they just go out, and I think that's just brilliant.
Yeah, it's an encouraging example for us, an inspiring example, I suppose, as we head towards Christmas and wanting to share that good news, that we come again and see the baby in the manger, we see Jesus, and then we run and tell everyone exciting news that we've heard. Yeah. And for you as an evangelist, and obviously you speak a lot about the birth of Jesus over this time of year and encouraging people in the church to do the same. I wonder, in the time you've been at Dunstable, if there's one lesson that you've learned about Christmas evangelism, what would that be?
Can I give you one humorous one and one real one?
Yes.
People are a lot braver when knocking on doors when you've got a choir standing behind you.
That's
you can get away with a lot of things when you've got a choir behind you singing Christmas songs.
There we go. Yeah.
But a real one is that I think what we've learned is don't necessarily see Christmas as the peak of the evangelistic year, but see it as kind of the catapult into the next year. Because I think what we can do, we can build up to Christmas, do loads of evangelism, which we should be doing because it's such a culturally we have that opportunity. But then the danger is that we stop, like we get to Christmas, stop, New Year started, our evangelism was done for the last year, great. But actually to carry that opportunity. So we've been working up to Christmas, we're inviting friends along. We pray that our friends will have come along to Christmas, come to church the first time, and then we seek to use that to build momentum into the next year to see if we can continue those relationships. And I think that's been really important at Christchurch, that we kind of plan ahead after Christmas to see how are we going to use that wonderful opportunity we've had to continue those relationships, continue those opportunities. So we've been doing Hope Explored, or we've been trying to encourage people to continue to meet up deliberately and purposefully, and to just continue that conversation, because we've put so much work into it. We don't want that to stop. And so to seek to carry that wonderful message of Christmas into the new year, and to continue that flowing so that it kind of flows into New Year, into Easter, and kind of carries on.
Well, on episode 6, we talked to Wayne Clarke, who, among other things, has his own Christmas podcast. Obviously not as good as this one, but he does have his own Christmas podcast. And he also owns a huge number of Christmas books and has a head filled with loads of festive facts. And I asked him what some of his favourite festive facts are, and here is him answering that very question.
Favourite Christmas fact. My favourite tiny Christmas fact is the name of King Herod the Great's first wife. Herod had 10 wives, but his first wife was called Doris. Makes everyone laugh, that one. My favourite, rather more complicated Christmas fact is the story of the carol Hark the Herald Angels Sing, which we sing without thinking about the history of it. And when you say who's it written by Charles Wesley, one of the greatest hymn writers of all time. Except it wasn't really, because when Wesley wrote those words down, he wrote, "Hark how all the welkin rings." The welkin meaning the skies, the heavens. And it was his friend George Whitfield, friend of Charles Wesley, George Whitfield, who rewrote it and said, no, that doesn't work. Let's rewrite it as "Hark the herald angels sing glory to the newborn king," which, when you think about it, isn't biblical. The angels who visited the shepherds didn't sing glory to the newborn king. They sang peace on earth, but we sing it anyway. And then the other peculiar thing about that carol is that when Wesley wrote the carol, he said he wanted the tune that it was going to be sung to, because he didn't write tunes, he only wrote words. He said he wanted the tune to be one that was solemn and serious. And in his day, it was only ever sung slowly and as if it was a bit dirge-like, really.
Okay.
But then 100 years later, the famous composer Felix Mendelssohn had written a tune, part of a cantata, to commemorate the anniversary of the printing press, bizarrely. And Mendelssohn was a secularist. He wasn't a believer, wasn't a Christian. And he said, if this music is ever used for anything else, it must only be used for secular purposes, not for church music. That isn't what it was for. But the English musician, whose name was William Cummings, put together Wesley's words as developed by Whitfield with Mendelssohn's tune and gave us the carol we sing today. So it's such a bizarre mixture of words that Wesley didn't write to a tune that Mendelssohn wrote for something else that was entirely secular, that he didn't want used as a Christmas carol, to become one of my favourite Christmas carol. I don't know if it's yours, but it's my favourite Christmas carol. It just says Christmas to me.
And finally for today, we move on to episode 7 of series 1, where we chatted to L.R. Hay, who's an author, and she shared with us, as part of her episode, an exclusive reading. I emphasise that word exclusive, the kind of exclusives that only this podcast can get. An exclusive reading for one of her books is from her book Joseph's Boy, which is a retelling of the Nativity account as part of her Young Testament series, which is excellent. Highly recommend you get a copy if you don't already have one. And if you don't already have one, here is an opportunity to experience a little taste of that book.
So this is after they've arrived in Bethlehem, and Jamie
Joseph's little boy, is just outside the stable. He caught the briefest flash of light in the clouds some distance away. Was a thunderstorm coming? It might have been Jamie's imagination, but he did feel that slight tingle of hairs standing up on the back of his neck that was a sign lightning was in the air. Jamie waited to see if there would be another flash. For a moment he thought he'd been mistaken, but then it showed again, just a glimmer over the Bethlehem hills. And then darkness once more. Was that it? Disappointing. He should definitely go back in. He didn't want to miss anything. But then, oh, how can I tell you? How will you ever believe me? The sky ripped open as if they had been living in a thick sack all this time without knowing, and someone outside the sack had decided to tear a long gap in it to let real light shine in for the very first time. Strange beings poured through, more and more and more of them, circling and swooping and filling the sky over the hills, as if whatever place was on the other side of the rip was emptying to come and be with the people of Earth. Jamie dropped to his knees, terrified, even though he was at a distance. What was happening? What were these vast, fluid creatures alight with unearthly fire? A fireball of liquid gold shot down onto the hilltops, and a commanding voice drifted faintly across the night air. "Do not be afraid." Angels! Jamie gasped as if he would never breathe again. An army of angels there in front of his eyes, more than he could ever count as they merged into each other and split again in a strange eternal dance while music played, unlike anything Jamie had heard.
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas!